Hi and welcome. My name is Ali Hart and I am the host of this podcast, and you're listening and watching How to Build a Creative Business in a Noisy World. I really hope you enjoy the episode. Hi and welcome. So today I have Gareth and Jonny. I know that a number of you had said about I was featuring on their podcast, which is Greenways, and I have talked about my faith here on the platform pretty recently, but also have touched on it. And now I believe that that's part of me. That's part of the branding that I have. So I'm really excited to be able to open up the door a little bit more on that. And one of the verses, oh dear, is it Hebrews? Maybe the guys could help me out in this, is faith is to believe in the things we hope for and to be sure of the things we cannot see. And for me, that's like a seamless link to creativity, to the path that we as creatives are carving out. But I know that there are a number of you are not creatives and are listening to this because you really enjoy the interviews, and it's lovely to have you. So today I know we'll be able to touch on great things which will stir up a little bit of a conversation in your own head or with people who you know listen to the podcast too. So without further ado, I will let the guys introduce themselves. Gareth, do you want to go first?
Yeah, Ali, thanks very much for having us on. It's a bit of a treat here to hang out with you and your followers. My name is Gareth Maclean. I am the minister, the pastor in Orangefield Presbyterian Church, which is in East Belfast on top of the Castlereagh Road. And I'm husband to Lara, who is a social worker. I've got 3 amazing kids, Karis, Archie and Lily, and a dog called Brody. I don't know how much more you want or how much less you want.
That's great. Yeah, we can delve in a little bit deeper. What about you, Jonny?
Yeah, so well, I'm Gareth's co-host on Greenways podcast, and I've been part of the same church actually for most of my life, and I live in East Belfast with my wife Naomi Campbell actually. So if you're aware of the significance of that, you're giving away your age, I think. And then I work full time for Alpha HTB. So if anyone's ever heard of the Alpha course before, the Alpha course is like an opportunity to explore the big questions of life and God and faith and what Christians believe and why. And then the way it works is you have something to eat and you watch a film, and then after the film you get half an hour, 45 minutes just to chat about it. And it's actually designed for people outside the church. So it's a very kind of open, friendly, informal sort of experience, and like around the world millions of people have tried it. So I lead there, except you, Ali.
Yeah, I know so many of my friends who don't necessarily go to a church, or they're questioning their faith. They rave about it, so that's why I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Yeah, like I mean, obviously I'm going to say this, I'm sold on it, but I have met very, very few people, if any. I don't think I've met anybody in person who has been on Alpha and not enjoyed it, and people are coming from every kind of background, no faith, half of faith, or lots of faith, and I think universally people discover that it's actually really fun. It's still really fun to make friends and talk about these things, because we don't have permission to talk about them that often, I don't think. So yeah.
Brilliant. And also even you're talking about new friends and all, like I've been looking at like where people spend their time, who your friendship groups are, and that is one of it must have been someone we were with recently they were out walking with them and the kids, and they'd said, oh well, we met them through Alpha.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And what about then? So if we are kind of get straight into like the journey, Gareth, that you've taken, so my pastor, minister, do we say, of our church is Ivan Steen, who I know that you know.
Good friend. Yeah.
And so I should have him on actually to talk, because his is a very creative path. He's a dentist and he worked abroad and different things. What about you? Was it kind of a straight path? Did you believe like it was a kind of old school calling, or how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. I know when I was 5 years old, I was preaching for the family. No, I'm only joking. Not at all. Not
Everyone else is on stage and Gareth has a Bible in the.
Yeah. No, I have to be honest. Nobody's more surprised that I'm a minister than I am. Um,
He surfs,
I,
by the way, everybody. I remember this. Someone picked up on this on your podcast. They're like,
yeah,
"Oh, he
that's
surfs."
right. That's
Yeah,
right. Badly, badly. I run better than I surf, and I drink coffee better than I do either of those.
yeah.
Yeah. So my journey into ministry, I studied business and IT through school and university, mostly because I could, and I didn't find it that challenging, and it provided an opportunity to play rugby and to surf and to be with friends and have that university experience. But coming towards the end of uni, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to go into that kind of corporate world.
Okay.
And so I had the chance, when my mates were all doing a placement from university working, I had the chance to go and study business in the States on a scholarship. And I went to Kansas, Wizard of Oz country.
Wow.
And it was a Christian school, and I picked up some theology and did a bit of youth work at the local church. And probably in that season, God started to take hold of my life and say, actually, this is what I want you to do. And I came back from the States, graduated, and got a job as a youth worker at a church in East Belfast, and did 7 years just getting alongside young people and just getting into their world and pointing them towards God, and just helping them navigate those teenage years. And the longer I did it, the more opportunity I had, not just to spend time with them and learn their story, but also with their parents and their grandparents, and my love for people and being with people, and helping people to make sense of their life and to see how their life and the story that God was telling came together and connected. So just over time, I grew into, I guess, the job I'm doing now.
And did you meet your wife during that time?
That's a great question as well. My
She's
wife
social
and I,
worker, you were saying, is that
yeah,
right?
yeah, she's
So
social.
I guess both working, well, youth work, there's this understanding of each other's field.
No, our paths had intermingled and crossed since we were tiny kids.
Okay.
Our dads worked together down in County Armagh. But there's 4.5 years between Lara and myself.
Okay.
And so in school years, that's like a whole lifetime. You don't talk to somebody who's 4.5 years younger than you in school. So I went to university, and I was graduating when she was starting. And the small group that she was part of was organizing an event, a barbecue on the beach to invite friends along to. And they invited me to come along and speak about Jesus. And then I ended up back at a mutual friend's house afterwards, drinking coffee, and we started talking, and the rest is history. What's wonderful though, I maintain I'd never met Lara before that night, and yet there's a photograph of her as a baby at a Christmas party in her mum's arms, going up to see Santa, and I'm in the background of the photo, fighting with my sister probably.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And in terms of hindsight, just to get straight in, would you see God? Well, I know the answer to this. God was in that. God was part of that journey, your relationship, and you being there at the right time. Some people don't necessarily believe that God was in it, but they'll say, "Oh, timings," and the universe. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily believe that every single detail in my life is predestined. I think there's these parallel lines between a sovereign God who is telling his story and bringing things to a good place ultimately, and the element of free choice that we have as humans, and the free choice that I have. I can choose to do things that align me with God's plans and purposes as I see them, or I can go off and do my own thing. So is Lara the only person that God had ever planned for me to be with? I don't think I believe that. I think he opened doors and I walked through them. And I'm in a good place.
Did you like what you preached that day?
I don't think either of us could remember what I preached that day.
And Jonny, what about you then? So Alpha is not like something you go to uni and I'm assuming so. Did you study? Not that as people know in this podcast, I don't actually care for ticking the boxes in education and creativity. Like it's always, what if you're a hard worker? That's what I like. But what path did you take to get to where you are?
Yeah, so I went to Grosvenor in East Belfast and really enjoyed it, especially my last couple of years there. Really enjoyed it, and
I love school too. Some people do. Yeah. I love school. Yeah.
I'm caught in this place. I do think there's some people never leave school, in the sense of like, it's always a hugely significant thing in their life, and I do think it's healthy to grow up. But but at the same time, I still miss school in many ways.
Did you
but
peak
yeah,
in school, Jonny? Just kidding.
might have, yeah.
Yeah.
Like somewhere around 16, 17, I was very happy in school. But I'm from a family of English teachers. So I always liked writing. And I did kind of 3 essay writing. I did 4 essay writing A levels. And then I actually went to the law school at Queen's, and the law school at Queen's, my first year at law school in Queen's was probably the most difficult year of my relatively short life. And that it was probably the only time in my life where I experienced significant regret. You know, I remember thinking I've made the wrong choice here. And then I came to a real crossroads, and I thought, I really need to pull the trigger. I need to go in completely the other direction, or I need to finish what I started. And I actually spoke to a few people who were a bit older and wiser than me. And I just needed one person to say, drop everything and go and do something else. And every one of them said, finish what you started.
Right.
So I made this little commitment in my car one day driving down to Queen's, like, I'm going to finish this law degree if it kills me. And in the end, I had a fantastic year out. I lived in France for a year, and then I really enjoyed my final year.
Right.
So
whereabouts in France?
I was in Lyon.
Okay.
And I still miss it. I still think about it all the time. I just had an amazing year there. And then I kind of knew, I finished that law degree, and I knew the whole time that after that I would study theology as a postgrad, and I would work in the Christian charity sector. I had an experience when I was 16 when faith went from being something that was black and white to something that was like in full color. And it happened in an instant, actually. And it felt like my faith, which was very two-dimensional, was suddenly in 3D, and it was suddenly very real. And I actually felt in that moment when I was 16 that I kind of knew I would work in something ministry related for the rest of my life. And so that's the direction I went in after I finished at law school and studied theology as a postgrad. I knew I would work in the church or for the church or through the church somehow. And I just didn't know what my job title would be. And I didn't feel called to be a parish minister, but I didn't feel that I wanted to be a youth worker either.
Okay.
And that
or
probably
missionary,
ruled out.
you know, like missionary is another.
Yeah.
I always thought you would do that.
It just didn't really, I probably ruled out some of the most obvious options. And then I was at an event once, and somebody felt that they had heard from God for me and approached me completely like out of the blue as a stranger. And they said, Jonny, I think God has a job for you to do that doesn't have a job title. That will actually involve lots of different things, and you won't really be able to put a title on it. And it was as if that just like, it just fitted really well with sort of the story that God was writing in my life. And that's kind of how I've ended up in Alpha, because I sort of serve the church in a variety of ways, but it's quite a wide remit in Alpha in the sense of I work with people outside the church and inside. I work with churches of all different denominations, and then I do a bit of serving in Orangefield, but then I do quite a lot outside as well. So, that's
with what Gareth was saying there about doors, was Alpha a door then for you, or was you looking for that, or what would you say? How did that come about?
I'm the same as Gareth, Ali. Like I used to believe in a micromanaging God, and I've lost my faith in the micromanaging God. I think
love that line. That's a great line.
Yeah, I've come to believe that God probably trusts me more than I realize. And like, as well as me having faith in him, I think I've come to believe that he has some faith in me too, that I can make the right decisions, that I can express my passions and interests in the right channels, and I think as life has gone on, it's so funny. Like, even my wife and I are trying to make decisions at the minute about our house and looking at other options. And I'm not sure I believe anymore that God wants to micromanage that process. I'm open to his voice and his insight, but I think more often than not, he puts the ball back in my court and says, Jonny, what would you like to do?
Isn't that, I love that too.
More,
yeah.
He's more artist than mathematician.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, and I was I was listening to Steve Furtick, or I was reading in one of my daily things. Going to sound really holy here. I've been on track recently, but one of them was saying, we think of God as this like big, harsh, strict. You have to do this, you have to do that, and it doesn't. But actually, it's like God wants a friendship with us and wants there to be a bit of a push pull, as you say, to be. So do you think then that it's the faith is the could you summarize faith, Gareth? No, could you because everyone has to have faith in a day. You have to have faith that, well, people that you're going to get a job, or you're going to have to believe. People talk about manifesting and talk about meditating. Is it wishy-washy like that, or how would you summarize a day-to-day faith when you get up in the morning, do you go to bed at night?
2,000 years of church history in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Much. Yeah, Ali.
I don't ask for much, Gareth. I don't ask for much.
For me, it is about an awareness of the presence of a God who is both creative and compassionate with me in every moment. And it's trying to cultivate that awareness that I am not simply here as a self-centered, selfish entity in this moment. So when I read the Bible, the first two things that burst out to me about God are, firstly, his creativity. And we see that in the book of Genesis. And then when God speaks and says who he is to Moses, he says, I'm compassionate. It's the first thing he reveals about himself. And that creativity and that compassion, I think define God really, really well. And for me personally, what that looks like is I'll get up early. I have 3 kids in the house. My house is carnage most of the time. Yeah. And the only quiet space I can get is first thing in the morning. And I guess some of your listeners might talk about meditation or mindfulness. We just call it prayer in Christianity. And I will either go for a walk, or I'll sit in a chair in my living room that kind of looks out into the back garden, and I'll sit there and just try to become really still and aware, not just of myself, but also of God with me. This God who is both good, loving, and present. And then I'll read scripture, and I'll read it as a two-way conversation. So I'm not just reading a book, but I'm actually talking and
like
listening.
That. Yeah.
God, I'll do it over coffee. And I'll start my day with that. I'll finish my day with something similar, a short time of prayer, just reflecting back on the day. Where do I need to say sorry to someone or to God? Where have I experienced goodness this day? Where have I felt anxiety, either in my mind or my body? What have been the reasons for that? Where has God obviously been with me, and where have I missed him throughout the day? And just that little bit of self-reflection at the end of the day. And then the rest of the day is just made up of very short prayer arrows, mostly saying, God help.
Yeah, prayer arrows. Yeah. Well, we discussed on your podcast as well about how it's only when I think live, that's why I talked about a noisy world, and I know we're in people's ears now, and thanks for listening, everyone, but it's I feel it was Jonny, you were talking about being at Summer Madness and the person drinking water and how you were there, and you maybe didn't notice that at the time. And I think my response to that was, I believe that it's only in the still that you see the connections. So my mum, her church isn't open again, and it was dad died on 30 years ago, and Monday passed. We were recording this in April. But the day before that, if you go by the years, was the day he was buried. It was on a Sunday. And mum's minister, totally different minister, didn't know dad, didn't know anything, preached on the same verse out of John that was at dad's funeral. And it was like this really gorgeous moment of, well, that's God. And it's only whenever mummy, we got her tapped into Zoom and whatever to be there and that. And it's like us having time with my brother, 3 of us at the grave, which we never do. And just that moment of her saying, do you know what that was today? So do you see that as well in the sort of when you allow yourself time to see things around, it's micromanaged, but to see God in the making of your day, Jonny?
Yeah. I think certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, I think as I journeyed through my 20s, somewhere towards the end of my 20s, I became aware that the patterns and rhythms of my life were totally unsustainable, and that actually to find like stillness and soulfulness and thoughtfulness and reflection in life now is a huge battle, and it's something that I think you have to be very intentional about. And yeah, I mean, I do believe in a God who is often more in stillness and in quietness than in the spectacular things and the noise of life. And then yeah, just having come through Easter, probably my favorite story in the Bible actually is of the risen Jesus after Easter, who I always have this sense that if I was the choreographer for the resurrection, I would have had the red arrows, the Belfast Community Gospel Choir, like pyrotechnics, probably held it down at the Odyssey somewhere. But Jesus like barbecued some fish for his pals because they were traumatized. And I just always had this sense that like my spirituality as I get older has become more about food, time, slowness, friendship, than it used to be. It used to be more about noise and events and spectacular things. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to be 32 this year. I'm not as old as Gareth, but
thanks.
I do still I do see like a slowing down of my spirituality for sure. And I'm finding God in the midst of that. And some days I still spend 3 hours on my phone, and
so that's what I was going to say about is the talking about spirituality and how Jesus with the fish and barbecuing after I think a lot about Jesus and him. I'm interested in what your experience as being a Christian or having faith was growing up through that, because I was never very good at being in the Christian bubble. Like I loved it. I thrived on it. It was great. But I always had non-Christian friends. I was traveling. I guess there was that running away from Jesus in a way. And I remember someone saying to me, "You're not running away. Jesus you're still in a little shoestring. There's still a connection there." But do you feel like you are where you are today, Gareth, because were you surrounded by only, was everything that you did based around the Christian? Maybe it's a Northern Irish thing. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but was it a safe zone all the time? Or, because I guess I look at Jesus, how I look back on it now and think he was in the temples, he was with the lepers, he was with the people, he was having these, as you say, gentle discussions with people as well as on a big scale.
Yeah, so I guess for me growing up, interesting story. I know you shared some of your sort of background and journey on our podcast when you were on, but I grew up in a house where we were all kind of nominally just about Northern Irish Christians, went to church a couple of times a month, went to Sunday school sometimes, but it was always an event kind of thing. And when I was probably 10, 11 years old, my grandfather had 7 heart attacks in a couple of days and was rushed into Craigavon Hospital. And I was pretty young. We didn't know what was going on, but my mum recounts the story, and her sister were told that critically ill is not going to live through the night. And my mom sat at his bedside throughout the night, and she wasn't a Christian, but she knew enough of what it would look like to pray. So she prayed somewhere in the middle of the night when nobody was about, "God, if you just heal my grandfather, I'll give my life to you. I'll become a Christian." And she sat with him all night, weeping and praying this prayer. And in the morning, the doctors came in and said, we can't explain this, but he seems to have stabilized. We think he's probably going to live. And so mom phoned our minister at the time and explained the story and said, "I think I want to become a Christian." And it's kind of, as a minister, it's the dream phone call. So he came round, they talked and read some stuff, and he prayed with her, and she gave her life to Jesus. And then that changed the trajectory of our whole family. Within a short time, my sister and I had both become Christians. Probably about 10 years later, my father had as well. And so church became sort of less optional, more substantive in our lives. But then growing up as a teenager, I played rugby, I played a lot of sport, and I probably lived the old Northern Irishism, a foot in both camps. if you like. I had Christian friends who grounded me a little bit, but I kept pulling away, going in the other direction. And it was absolutely relationships with people, older Christians, more mature Christians who just seemed to gently bring me back. There was one guy, Kenny Hooks, who was a maths teacher, rugby coach, elder in my church, who I'm pretty sure I came out of school as a Christian largely because of Kenny. At university, my life at university was, I was in the CU one night and Kelly's the next minute, and going full steam ahead in both environments. And at the end of my first year, there was a girl who was the president of the CU who said to me, can I bring you for a walk on the beach? And I'm thinking, happy days. She's really attractive. This is really, really exciting. So we're walking the 1.5 miles down Portchurch Strand, and the whole walk down, she's trying to work up the courage to start a really hard conversation. And I'm thinking, when do I hold this girl's hand? And we got to the rocks down at the far end of the Strand. And she said to me, Gareth, God's given you all these gifts. He wants to use you, but because of the way you're living your life, he can't. Okay. And you need to make a choice here and now, whether you're going to live for him or live for yourself. Yeah. And it's moments like that of people who were a little bit more mature than me in the faith, who were close enough to me to have a friendship and permission to speak into my life, and who had the courage to do it. And those are the moments I would look back to and chart as mountaintop moments. Yeah. In my life.
I find even now, I find we have friends who are a little bit further ahead as well, and in terms of their journey and their age, but they are brilliant. It feels like you can, when you have those people, and they don't even realize half the time. I guess that guy Hooky, probably didn't. Not necessarily. And what about you, Jonny? Your Grosvenor then, was there, like, I don't know, what's it called, SU? I wasn't very aware of that in school type thing. Is that, yeah.
I never went to SU. I see it 3:30 when the last kind of
period 9
was over. I'm out of here. Like there was nothing that was going to stop me from getting out of there. So I wasn't really part of it.
Summer Madness you mentioned before, so that had been an annual event. But wasn't it so cool to be like just different, almost like camp? There was so many elements to that which just made sense to me.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I, probably a bit like Gareth, I had a really solid Sunday school education, and just all of the different elements of the kind of cultural religion that Northern Ireland's very familiar with, and I'd been given all the facts. And as I say sometimes on Alpha, I think people need to know that it's true, and I was probably weighing up as a teenager, is all this stuff that I've been taught true? But I think people more importantly need to know, is it real? Like, are those facts making any kind of difference in anybody's life, And then, is it true and is it real? And I think when I was 16, 17, I started to discover the reality of it. I'd been taught a lot about the truth of it, and it didn't really make any great difference in my life, if I'm honest. And then 16 or 17, I discovered like the reality of faith and just what a huge difference that was making in my life. Like I was becoming a different person, and it wasn't through the power of self-help. It was something external to me. This presence that had come into my life was changing me from the inside out. And I was trying to explain to my folks that something was going on in my life that I was trying to give words to something that was actually about power, this kind of extraordinary power and presence of God was changing me. And I didn't really have the language to explain everything that was going on, but I recognized something was happening, so
that was when you're 16, 17.
Yeah.
And your friendship groups then, what would your weekend have looked like?
Yeah, oh man, it's so funny. I mean, I was the same. I had given up on church really, and a few friends dragged me back into church, and just through social connections. And I'm a very self-assured person now. I've just been really lucky that way. But as a teenager, I was very wobbly, like not sure at all of who I was or who my friends were or what I wanted from anything. And a few people from Orangefield actually dragged me back into the church community, and I just would have settled for a few friends anywhere that I knew for sure were my friends. Yeah. So that's kind of how I reconnected. And then once I'd sort of taken the plunge in terms of throwing both feet first into the life of the faith community, then my weekends, every weekend, I was chasing Jesus around the country. Like I would have been at a different church Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday.
You're not just looking for a wife, no? Is that not what they?
Yeah, it was a huge part of it. It was a
Joking.
huge part of it. Yeah, it really was. Those were the two
Meanwhile,
things.
Gareth was in what do you call it in Port Kelly's, and I was in the bottom of Belfast.
Well, Sandy Miller, who like was around at the start of Alpha, said that God and women are a very, very powerful combination in terms of like motivation, you know. And I discovered that as a teenager. Like part of my life was discovering this faith that was actually real and not just a sort of culturally religious thing. And then the other part of my life was trying to find a wife, you know. And I just found that it was mostly getting a female to agree to what I was suggesting in terms of going out somewhere or like starting a relationship. I found that the most difficult part. You know, I had all the enthusiasm, but none of it wasn't being reciprocated on their end.
Brilliant. You've just touched on their cultural and religious. So I don't know if you watched the Nolan show last week. Did you hear about it? Yeah, it was discussing Christianity, and one of the things that Father Darcy was talking about was, you know, well, my Michael puts it quite well. He would say, don't judge Christianity by its members. So I think religion in Northern Ireland it's because I have a lot of listeners as well in the States, but religion in Northern Ireland is contentious, I guess, and some people who don't necessarily share Christian faith look at that and see it's one way or the other linked to that. Have you any views on that, either of you?
Religion, Ali, I think religion without the substance of true like living faith, compassion for others, a life that's being shaped by Jesus, if you take those things out of it and you just leave religion, I think it's one of the ugliest things in the world. I really do. I know people in my life who are religious but are not like being apprenticed in the way of Jesus or patterning their lives in the way of Jesus. They're just religious, and they're some of the like the ugliest kind of people, and it's like the ugliest way of life that I've seen. And I think there's mountains of that in Northern Ireland, which is sad. And I think somebody like Stephen Nolan is talking about spiritual thirst and spiritual curiosity, but he has to fight his way through. Sometimes I think there's just so much of a hangover of that. To find the substance in the middle of it is hard. But I do think when people explore to the point of finding that substance and the real Christian community in the heart of the church, like it's life-changing. I've seen that over and over and over again on Alpha.
What about you, Gareth?
Yeah, I was listening to you saying about Michael saying don't judge Christianity by its members. Gandhi said something very similar. He said,
he's probably just quoting Gandhi, let's be honest, but he said that on Saturday night.
or vice versa, who knows. But, you know, Gandhi said, you know, I like your Jesus, just not your Christians, because there's this massive gap. And in some ways we shouldn't be surprised by that, because we're human. Like we all have our stuff, we all have our baggage. The problem is when Christians masquerade as being perfect or being self-righteous or being like at a higher moral plane than everybody else, we come crashing down. And when people maybe outside the church or on the fringes of the church expect Christians to be better, like our stuff's every bit as messed up and broken. The only difference is we have found a God who loves us and forgives us and is gently putting us back together. And I think there's something about that. I think for anybody who's listening who has been hurt by a Christian or by a church, my suggestion is to open up the book of Matthew or Mark or Luke or John and have a look at Jesus and start there. And don't throw, for lack of a better term, the baby out with the bathwater.
Just to shift gear then slightly. So because I'm encouraging people to build a creative career and to be strong in their creative career, one thing that I found and still find a little bit difficult is the money side. and the success side, because I'm obviously telling people keep going and be present. And the whole branding side of things, this personal branding that I very much believe in, is about you believing in yourself to move forward to be successful. But I can see now after 11 years that finally it actually works, right? But there was so many years of it not working, and it felt like it was just, what's the point? Do you believe, or what are your views on, it's not necessarily success, but money? I don't mean tithing, but I mean income. So I used to always say to Michael, you went into teaching and from day one you had this income and that's what it was, and nobody questioned it. Whereas, if I utter the words of my mom that I sold a painting for whatever, I know that she still shudders. So I don't know whether that's her growing up on a pig farm, and then when daddy died, she was on her own. But so maybe that's not even to do with religion or Christianity. But do you have any take on that success, money, God's view on being successful?
So
in the physical sense, sorry.
So there's a story in the Bible about a kind of a master, a property owner who's going off on a journey, and there's three. Sorry, I'm not preaching anybody. I'm just.
I don't mind. This is it. Use the platform. Any platform, Gareth.
And he's got these three people working for him, and he says to the first one he gives, maybe 10 talents, 10 bags of gold, whatever. To the next one he gives 5. To the next one he gives 1, and it says he gives to each one according to their ability. So the one who was given 10 obviously has more ability to steward that and use it well. And the story unfolds that the one who got 10 uses it really well, invests it really well. And when the master comes back, it's doubled. And when the one who got 5 again uses it really well, invests it really well, and it doubles. But the one who's given 1 hides it in the ground, doesn't use it, ignores it. And whenever the master comes back, he gives the 1 back. There's this whole thing plays out about, and the story is essentially about, God has given each person different gifts, different abilities. Whether or not you talk about money, I'm talking about, I guess, talents and opportunities. And he's calling each person to be the best version of themselves they can be. And I believe that happens in friendship with him and relationship with him. But we've all got talents and skills. And there's something incredible. Like, Ali, you're an artist. If you had to sit and be an accountant every day, you'd probably crack up. So you would, because you've been created to be an artist. Where somebody else is created to be an accountant, somebody else is created to serve people. So they're working in Tesco's, and I'm created to be a pastor. I know that deep in my bones. And there's something incredibly rewarding to me and to others when I live within my design. So for me, success is discovering who God has created you to be, and then just going after that 100%. And listen, you don't get into ministry because you want to make a lot of money. Sometimes success is equated to financial reward, but often in this world it's not, because there's so much inequality. I think success is discovering who you are created to be, and then, if possible, finding a way to spend as much of your time as possible doing that.
Agreed. I agree. Jonny?
Yeah. Oh man, I have a ton of different thoughts. And just, I think probably something that has kind of guided my thinking on that stuff, success, money, sort of becoming a bit more established in life in terms of, like, property that I've taken on, and promotions that I've had in work. And I would sometimes remember the story of Jesus' baptism, where before he had kind of achieved anything that he set out to achieve, or before he had entered into a life of ministry, God spoke this sort of affirmation over him and said, I'm pleased with you just by virtue of who you are. And I haven't always done that very well, but I think I've always tried to be guided by that sort of affirmation. That I think when you have these anchoring points in your life, and that the people around you love you and accept you, and that you're loved and accepted by God, I think there's a lot of freedom then to sort of express yourself and go after things, but not feel that they're the ultimate, if that makes sense.
And I discussed happiness a lot as well, and how happy, because for
Yeah.
me, I would always say that ultimately I just want you to be happy, and same with the boys, and I
Mm.
said to them, I want you to know Jesus, I want you to be happy. The good thing I find with actually being a little bit more established, I probably should use that word than successful because I have a long way to go, but
Mm.
is tithing for me. So figuring out we do
Okay.
quarterly now, and I used to, not even that long ago, I used to just decide I wanted to give a figure or whatever to the church, because I was like, oh, I don't have the money, so I'll just be present and I'll do all the things, and I'll do all the coffee mornings, and I'll do all these free workshops and do things. But actually, it was brilliant. It served a purpose, but I was like exhausted for it. So it's amazing how when things change over time, your role as well in the church. Just wanted to ask you a little bit about creativity in the church, not in the way that we were discussing on your podcast, but how is the church shifted, which is called the Hindsight series. So how does the church look different to you now? Not even necessarily as a business, the church is a business, but it is a physical base as well. How has that changed? How has online church served your, what does it look like now for you?
Me or Jonny?
Whoever.
Jonny, you go first.
Neither do you want to obviously answer. No one's
Well, I've been on, like, we've been on a bit of a journey, Ali. So like we would oversee say 270, maybe 300 Alpha courses a year in Northern Ireland, and then this time last year we lost the ability to host those completely. So you're sort of left with very little at that point, actually. And we had this thing that was going on internally where we said we're going to have to innovate hard and adapt quickly. And I think we saw this massive acceleration of creativity in the digital world, like many others. And we had this crazy idea this time last year that maybe we could invite people to do Alpha entirely online. So you would meet 20 strangers that you'd never seen before in your life, and you'd watch a 20-minute film, eat a bag of popcorn, have a coffee, and then you would chat about it afterwards. And it has been the most extraordinary year. Like, we have seen thousands of people around Ireland and the UK take part on Alpha, and I've seen people experience I just have a really, really positive, really kind of life transforming experience on it. Yeah. And we went from this position where doing something like that, creating community online, having really rich conversation about faith online, exploring faith online, it just wasn't a thing for us this time last year. Yeah. And then by the end of the year, it was like we had seen thousands of these pop up around the country, and different types of collaboration. We saw church leaders who were bivocational, working another job, taking it in and using it in their other workplace as well, and inviting people to sort of watch these films and be part of the conversation as well in a totally different context. So
those who adapt fastest win. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. I think that is true. I think we realized very quickly. We actually had a few people in the organization who, even Christmas of 2019, were saying this is coming and we need to be ready and adapt. And there were some within our organization who probably not laughed at them, but sort of said, no, I don't think we need to worry about it. And they were right. So yeah,
we couldn't have predicted. You couldn't have predicted. But also, I don't know if you feel the same. Whenever I have people join the workshops, I know it's a very different experience, but the fact that people give up their time to be in that space online, isn't that amazing? Like, I'm sure it still feels brilliant.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like I love it because it gives people a chance to actually contribute and to do something. And I use this analogy all the time, but the Dead Sea is dead because there's only content running into it and nothing actually comes out of it. And I think it's the same with faith. I think over the last year, people have had this experience where just content is pouring into them. So they're watching it on YouTube, they're watching it on Facebook, they're getting it by email, marketing emails, and all this content's going in, but it's got nowhere to go. And I kind of think you've got to make sure your neighbor knows that they're loved, and you've got to contribute to something around a sort of experience like Alpha, just so that you're your faith is actually being practiced,
Fed,
and it's
yeah.
being walked out. So I think
And
it's
there's
been,
the sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, they talk about psychologist was talking on a podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about how we can lose empathy. So people who overshare online or whatever, you don't have someone sitting. So say it's to 20,000 followers, you don't have someone looking you in the eye and saying, "I'm really sorry to hear that," or "Do you think that's best that you don't share that?" How do you feel those relationships are? Like prayers at the end of a service or whatever, Gareth. Like how have things like that changed, or do you think just the whole landscape is different for churches now?
Yeah, there's been massive amounts of change, Ali. What we have done, we went into lockdown 14 months ago, 13 months. I've totally lost track. It feels like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Now, but we went into lockdown. We had to adapt really quickly, and lots of churches tried different things, and lots of businesses tried different things, and everybody has learnt on the journey. We made a decision really, really quickly to say we did not want to lose the kind of live interaction aspect of a 10:30 on a Sunday morning Orangefield church family gather together. So we sacrificed quality to go for that live intentionality. So the whole way through at 10:30, I was standing in a building initially on my own, which was just bonkers.
So weird, yeah.
It was so weird. But looking into a camera into somebody's living room saying, "You're there, I'm here, we're here at the same physical moment, not the same physical space, but the same physical moment in time, worshiping God together, and the same God who is with me is with you." We adapted what we were doing. We changed how we prayed and actually learned loads about it, and how to hold, not just hold people's attention, but to just, I guess, almost make them the minister in their own living room. We're going to pray. Here's 3 things to pray about. I'm going to give you space in the prayer. So rather than me fill it with my words, let me give you space to put your words into this. Yeah. The biggest challenge we had, I guess, initially was you're asking people to engage in worship and connection through the same physical device and medium that they consume Netflix on.
Line of duty.
Well, that's it, line of duty. And we don't want church to be simply turn up and consume.
Agreed,
And the other challenge was people were sitting at home.
Passive. You don't want to be passive, I guess, right?
Yeah, and it's even worse than that, because they become critics. People were sitting at home listening to the sermon, listening to the song, talking to their husband, wife, kids, going, "I don't really like that. I don't know. What do you think? Do you like his shoes? Do you like?" And they're commenting on everything rather than actually worshiping and becoming aware of God's presence. And so we simply named that stuff and called it and said, "Guys, listen, it's going to be so easy for you to become critics of this. I need you to be aware of that. And when that happens in your mind, to just consciously name that, lay it down before God, and then move on with worship, because everybody's experiencing this. It's not just that young people are loving the online because they, stereotypically do digital better. Everybody is struggling with online, no matter who they are. So we had to learn that. But there was some amazing advantages to it as well. One of the things was we as a congregation became much more present in our communities, with our neighbours, with our feet in the soil. All of a sudden, mission wasn't the thing we went and did for a week in the summer, or the project we supported
halfway around the world. Walk out the door, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Outside your door.
That's it. We printed little cards. Put these through the person who lives to your left, to your right, and in front. If you go put these through your letterbox, and if they get COVID symptoms and can't get out, your phone number's on it, and then you can get their groceries for them. And we had people dropping hot meals off, with people dropping boxes of donuts off, with people picking prescriptions up. And we weren't unique. All over the place, people were doing these things. But we just learned what it was to become much more present in the community. So we had to transition a lot of how we did church and think, what are our values? What do we want to be aspirationally? And how do we do it in this moment, in this season, with all the restrictions that we have?
Brilliant. Guys, I absolutely love, I could talk all day. It's very exciting for me to have you. Can we just, can I ask you then, well, I talk about hopes and dreams, and we talk about what you're reading. But lastly, how do you deal with fear? Does your faith come in just on a day-to-day basis? That can be whether you like, or just not sure about the next decision you make with work, or just any fear on any level? I don't know, fear of a large wave. Like I was swimming yesterday in the sea and there were big rolling waves. But how do you deal with fear in summary, if possible, Jonny?
I deal
Any
with
tips?
fear. I deal with fear by mentally running over the most important relationships in my life and just becoming aware of the security that they offer. So that's my relationship with God, but it's actually a lot more than that too. Like I think about the families that we're attached to, the close friends that we have, and I think about the extraordinary resources that are available to us through those relationships. I find that very anchoring. I find that very like settling. And then I don't think as a person I'm not super attached to the things in life that are sort of easily lost, you know, so I don't really have any great fear about losing things because I'm not that attached to them to begin with. And then I think as I've got a wee bit older too, and I've sort of headed off into my 30s, I think I handle fear by listening to my body and my mind a little bit better than I used to, and sort of learning to accept my limitations, which is hard because I used to think I didn't have any.
Like a sub 50 10k, yeah, or is that still a limitation?
Sub 50 10k. No, so that's I've achieved that, but
nice work.
Yeah, I'll not. I mean, I see some friends running 5k in like 19-20 minutes, and I just have absolutely no concept of how that happens.
No,
I would need to drop about 3 stone for starters. But
yeah. What about you, Gareth? Any takes? But food's to be enjoyed. I love food.
Absolutely. I'm probably not great at looking at the limitations of my own body and constantly pick up injuries with these things. Fear's an emotion.
Yeah.
And I don't always want to be ruled by my emotions or governed by them. So I'll try and look at the factual aspect of it. Okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling panicky, I'm feeling uncertain, I'm feeling fear. Try to assess what the emotion is, and then why am I feeling like, you know, what power has this thing over me? So look at the factual aspect of it, and you know, like if it's cliff jumping, yeah, that's just scary. You know, something could go wrong. But if it's a hard conversation that I have to have, or a new thing, like we launched a podcast a few weeks ago, and that was scary, thinking, you know, we're going to put ourselves out there, put our voices out there, and you know, the worst thing is not that everybody listens and critiques it. The worst thing is that nobody listens.
They are. I've accounted for a few in my friends, so that's about 10.
But it's trying to assess the kind of what are the facts in this. Why are the actual reasons I would be scared or anxious about this?
And do you pray in fear? I do.
Yeah. But I tend to do that sort of assessing thing first, and then bring it to God and to say, is this something you want me to progress? Is this hard conversation? It's often a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Is this hard conversation something you want me to progress? What angle? How do you want me to address it? And then trust his voice, trust his leading.
Brilliant. And lastly, what are you reading, if anything?
The book I'm reading.
The Bible. Come on, it has to be the Bible. I'm joking. Obviously, it's the Bible. That's a given.
Well, let's take that for granted before we get red faces. Jonny and I both tend to have a number of books on the go at the same time. We tease each other about it. The best one I'm reading at the minute is a biography about Eugene Peterson, who's the guy that wrote the Message Bible and tons of other books.
Yes.
It's called Burning in My Bones. Okay. And it is absolutely, it's like chocolate in your mouth. It's like running water. It's beautifully written. It's a great
Could you send that one to me? I would love to read that.
Yeah, no problem.
I just finished a book Gareth gave me called Ultra Marathon Man, by a guy called Dean Karnazes, who ran 226 miles without stopping. So his kind of like his masochistic approach to running is actually teaching me a lot about Gareth's mindset and like why he is the way he is. he's been reading.
Have you done a marathon yet? Have either of you ran a marathon?
Gareth has run a few, haven't you?
I've run 4 or 5. I've run an ultra marathon as well.
Yeah, it's the ultra that a friend of ours just ran from here to Coleraine there recently, and you're like, you nutter.
Great.
I love it. I would love to do a full marathon. I have the half marathon coming up. Are you doing it? Are you doing the Belfast half? Both of you know? It's a virtual.
No, I'm probably going to go back and do the Mourne Wall in the next few weeks, which is 22 miles.
Great.
taking in a bunch of the peaks there. So it's good fun.
Running.
Running, walking, crawling, depends on what part of it is.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Where can you find us? In terms of the podcast, we're Greenways Podcast. You can get us on all the usual platforms, Apple, Spotify, all those things. Orangefield Presbyterian Church, we are online, but you can also book in and come on a Sunday morning, and we would love you to come along. And if you're coming because you've heard this, speak to us and let us know you've come along. That'd be great. And Jonny, Alpha?
Yeah, so if like Alpha sounds kind of intriguing and you think, you know, I've always wanted to try something like that, then you would go to try.alpha.org, or equally like all of our socials and even our YouTube channel. Like if you just type in Alpha Course or Alpha International, like our YouTube channel would give you a really nice flavor of it all. So
brilliant.
No matter where you are in the world, it's on.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of this too, is that we've broken down even more barriers of that. Just while you're talking there, Christianity Explored, I think that's the one we did, is it? Yeah, and it's the guy, the rugby player, and what do you call it?
Rico Tice.
Rico Tice, is that who it was? That was a brilliant one too, actually. And you know, I think as well, even now you're talking about, well, I'm now late 30s as of Monday. I would love to go back and be fed a little bit more like that. This discussion today feels like tapping into that. So thank you for joining me. Hopefully I didn't put you too much in the spot. I know that Gareth's like, do you want to give me a heads up here on... Can you not tell I wing life here, Gareth? This is the...
No, it's great. You know, I emailed Ali yesterday and said, listen, Ali, you know, we do in our podcast to talk about art and faith, and you've said to us, come on, we're church leaders, Alpha course coordinator. What do we know about creative businesses? But it's been really fun hanging out. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant. And that's the beauty of running your own business. You can decide these things and navigate it. And it's really been lovely. And I know it'll be so insightful for people just to even hear that. People maybe have never even heard of what we've just been talking about on any level. So I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that God, even though he's not a micromanager, placed the two of you in my path of late. And anybody, you can subscribe so you can tap into the rest of the interviews and other little nuggets that I give. But thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the episode, I would really appreciate some feedback, or for you to hit subscribe so that you get all the content every week in your inbox. And if you would like to check out my website, it's alihart.com, especially if you were thinking about needing some mentoring sessions, because I have openings coming up in the summer. Thanks for watching and listening, and I will see you on the other side.